Hello everyone and welcome to the OA 100 Pounders meeting. Today is Wednesday the 29th of December 2021 and with us today is the lovely Jackie W from Bushy. She joined the rooms in June 2008 and she has come to share with us her story today. Jackie, it is over to you.
Hi everybody, I'm actually a Jacqueline. It's Jacqueline. My name is Jacqueline. I am a compulsive overeater. I'm really nervous, and as I'm sitting here I feel like, my nose is itching, I want a wee. It's like everything is all my unconscious is telling me to go somewhere else, but yeah, more about that later. It's really nice to be here. I think before the pandemic, I'd never been to an online meeting. I'd only been to face-to-face meetings. As Lee said, I came into the rooms in 2008. And I have this sort of mythical thing about there are 100-pounder meetings. We just don't have them face-to-face in the UK. And I am a 100-pounder. And I kind of always wanted to go to one, because even though it's Overeaters Anonymous, I do, like it said in the beginning bit there, I do feel like there's something about being more than 100 pounds, as I was more than 100 pounds overweight, that kind of, and yeah, I want to make myself different from everybody, but I think it felt to me that there was this other angle about overeating, and that I could never hide it. I never got away with it. I never managed to conceal my overeating from other people. And I know since coming in that is not desirable either. I always used to have this fantasy, if only I could eat whatever I want and not put on weight. And I think I realized that I had kind of arrived, and that I was actually reaching for recovery when I was working the steps initially. And I actually thought, I actually don't care about that anymore. I just want to stop compulsively overeating. It's not about the weight. It's about what I realized was more about my compulsive overeating when I came in. I think I'll just try and keep it simple, because I can kind of jump all over the place and just do a little bit of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. What it was like, actually, Lee, do you want to share the photos just briefly? Rita asked if I'd send some photos over. And it was just to give an idea that I'd always been big. I always, from a very young age, I started eating. I started binging when I started overeating when I was really young, and I started binging when I was about 14, when a kind of a childminder we had taught me that you could go into a shop and buy a big bag of food and bring it home and eat it. Or she showed me, and we used to do that together when I was about 14. And my weight kind of went up and up. And this was just, they don't have to be up for long. It was just to show you that I'd always been overweight. And it was funny, my husband had said, in that picture at the end, there's a picture of me and my husband, and he said, oh, you make it look like it's the prize. It's like you lose weight and then you get a husband. And it's like, that's so not it. It was just that I was looking on my phone, and I don't have loads of full-length pictures of myself, and I just happened to have that one. So I sent it over to Rita. But also that was to show that was 5 years ago, and I'm roughly the same weight. Well, I am the same weight now as I was 5 years ago, which is literally mind-blowingly unthinkable. Because when I came in 2008, I had been binging for, at that point, 23, 25 years or something like that. And I'd been overeating for more like 30 years. I felt like there was, again, Risha asked me to do this 6 months ago. Just the thought of still being abstinent, it's like when she asked me, I couldn't not eat for an hour. I felt like as soon as the thought occurred to me, then I would be eating. It was like there was no pause in between it. From when I was very young, I would hide food. I would, even when I was sort of 6 or 7, I'd go down to the newsagent, which is like a sweet shop, and I'd always buy 2 things. I'd never buy one. I already knew that one wasn't going to be enough, and I'd get 2, and I'd stuff one in on the way back home, and then keep one to eat in front of other people, and that kind of carried on. And I felt the embarrassment when I was at school. I was always like the biggest in my class. I remember once when we were at a kind of activity camp when I was 14 or 13 or 14, we went gliding, which is like in a plane without an engine. And the guy who was taking us said, okay, the limit is 13 stone. Ha ha ha, as if anybody of you would be over 13 stone. But, please tell me if you are, because it's dangerous for you and the pilot if you're over 13 stone. And I was 14 stone and I said nothing. And because the humiliation of saying I weighed 14 stone in front of a class of people, I would rather die and take him with me because I couldn't even begin to imagine saying that in front of them. And so it was just a kind of a life of concealment, but excitement, because every time I thought about binging, I'd get excited. No matter how much I hated myself, my pattern was that I would, I don't know where to start the cycle, but say it was in the morning, I'd wake up, I'd be full of, vows that I would never do it again. I would be feeling strong, if a little bit kind of carb hungover. But as soon as I started eating, I realized that I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. I wouldn't be able to kind of stem the flow, put anything in the way of the dam, as it were. And, then I'd start planning what I was going to buy. I'd go and buy it. And, the pulse would quicken, the excitement would come, more so in the planning than in the eating, for sure, apart from like the first few minutes. And then I would start and I would feel just that kind of relentless inevitability of how miserable it was, how sick I'd feel. And actually I used to smoke. By the time I got into I was quite a heavy smoker. I was smoking about 40 cigarettes a day. But also I would smoke marijuana to increase my appetite, because I would be annoyed that I couldn't eat as much as I needed. So I'd smoke weed to get the munchies to eat. It was just crazy, because it was like there was nothing that I could get inside that would stop whatever it was that I wanted to stop. And I think before I came in, I didn't really know what that was. When I was, just another bit about step one, when I was 16 or 16, I developed an eye condition. I woke up one day with double vision, and went to see my doctor, whose husband happened to be a neurologist, and he diagnosed me with this thing called idiopathic intracranial hypertension, which is basically an excess of spinal fluid, and it's brought on most likely by being overweight. And it most happens in kind of obese teenage girls. And so I had a doctor telling me that if you don't lose weight, you're actually going to lose your sight. And I just kept eating. I was a full 2 stone heavier at my heaviest than I was when I first got diagnosed. Because it didn't matter. He could have just as soon as told me to fly to the moon, on my own. I wouldn't have been able to do it, just as I wasn't able to stop compulsively overeating. And I basically carried on like that, apart from when I was 26, 27, this kind of very rapid weight loss diet came to the UK, which was kind of quasi doctor recommended. You had to go to the doctor and get a certificate to say that you could do it. And then there were forms of counselling within the group. So it was meant to be a bit of a departure from slimming clubs. And I've been to a lot of slimming clubs. My mum took me to a diet doctor when I was 8 or 9. My dad took me to a slimming club when I was 12. And I did this thing, which was basically eating, it is what they call a very low calorie diet. You mix powder with water, and you drink it 3 times a day, and you didn't eat any food at all. And that was the only time I was able to lose weight. And what happened was that I lost 6 stone, I think, at the time, in a very short period of time. And I was suddenly the weight I'd been when I was 10 years old. I didn't know how to deal with it at all. As soon as I started eating food again, pretty much put it all back on, and ended up doing that diet 3 times. And it, in a way, it became like a bit of a safety valve for me. It was like, well, if I do it, because if I put on weight, I can always do the diet and then I can lose the weight again, because I'd never been able to lose it before. And there was this thing that I could do. And I think there was a lot of erroneous thinking that I wasn't aware of at the time. I just assumed that if you were thin, you just ate what you liked but you were thin. I just couldn't conceive that kind of thin people had some sort of control or some sort of made decisions that were healthy for them. I just assumed that they felt the same as me, but they were just able to do it. So as soon as I came off these diets and I started eating again, I put all the weight on. I couldn't quite understand what was going on. And in this period, I also stopped smoking. As I said, I was smoking 40 cigarettes a day. And I managed to stop overnight. Like, I just decided I was going to do it. I read a book, I put the cigarettes down, and then I put on 4 stone in 4 months.
10 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And again, I heard that when you stop smoking, you put on 10 pounds. So I thought I'd put on 10 pounds. I didn't know that you actually had to, if you kept on eating, you'd put on more weight. And I put on 4 stone. And actually, within 3 weeks of stopping smoking, I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. I was probably 26 years old. No, I wasn't. That was when I did that diet. It was 2005. So I was 34 years old. I ended up in a psychiatric hospital because I had a breakdown, basically, because I hadn't realized how much the cigarettes were holding me together and what putting them down and being without them would do to me. And when I was in that psychiatric hospital, I wasn't an inpatient, I was a day patient. My psychiatrist said to me that I should come to OA. When I came out of the facility, I did the diet again, and I lost all the weight again. And I went to some OA meetings. I went to probably 5 or 6 in 2006, and I just heard a lot of people who were thin. So I thought, well, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. Talk about not eating sugar or something, and I just thought, I just don't know what this is. I heard the word God, and then I left. I kind of stuck around for a few meetings, but I just couldn't get to grips with it. And inevitably, I put all the weight back on. And in 2008, someone I met at this, where I was doing the diet, told me about OA again. And she said that she was going to a meeting in East Finchley in North London, and did I want to come? And I said yes, and I went with her, and I never saw her again. But she gave me her brown book, which was the Overeaters Anonymous. I think it was probably the 2nd edition. You're giving away the 3rd edition here. It was the 2nd edition. She gave me her copy of that, and she disappeared. And it was just so amazing, because I then went to that meeting. I've been to that meeting pretty much every Sunday since 2008. And I arrived, I think when I arrived in OA at that time, I weighed about 17.5 stone, which is something in pounds, don't know, 200 and something high, 30 something. And my heaviest, I was 265 pounds. And yeah, I came in and I cried a lot, and I listened to what people were saying, and it really blew me away, because pretty much for the first time ever, it was that thing of hearing people say what I did, and they said it out loud, and they said it in a room with other people, and they laughed about it, and they talked about hiding the food, and they talked about, eating dinner before you go out for dinner, and they talked about, all the things that I used to do that I was so ashamed of, and they just talked about it like it was really natural, and I really felt that kind of welcome to Overeaters Anonymous, welcome home. And then the God thing came up again, and I just remember having this reaction and just asking if someone could call me to talk to me about it, because I felt like that there was this thing that was kind of being dangled in front of me that could be a solution, but actually wasn't going to be a solution, because it was going to be yet another thing that wasn't available to me, but it would be like just another diet that I couldn't do. I have this kind of stubborn refusal to do anything that's good for me out of a kind of misguided self-preservation. It's like too hard, or what if it doesn't work, or what if I get my hopes up, or what if I'm disappointed, or what, all this sort of what if, or yes, but. But I would say that this being in OA is probably the first time I've ever actually done what was suggested. I kind of just came and surrendered to the best of my ability, I surrendered to what I found here. And I think it was actually the identification that got me here, because I've been to loads of therapists, or sorry, I should say that kept me here. I've been to loads of therapists who had told me what to do, had suggested what I should do. You know, if you feel like eating, take a walk around the block. If you know, things like that. But it was only through coming here and just hearing people, as I was saying, just the identification that really pulled me in. And when I first came in, I didn't read. I mean, I'm a big reader. I didn't read anything other than OA literature for at least a year. I would just read the Lifeline sampler. I would read Overeaters Anonymous. I would just read and read and read, just because I could not get enough of this kind of newfound identification. And I needed it. I really needed it, because when I came in, after the period where I cried a lot and thought it's not going to work for me, I tried to kind of get abstinent. I wasn't quite sure what that was for me. I ended up choosing like 3 meals a day and putting down recreational sugar, so being like, you know, confectionery and stuff like that. And I did it, but it was a real white knuckle affair, and I lasted about 2 weeks. And I remember I asked someone to sponsor me, and we had a date to meet and talk about step 1. And then I couldn't do the food thing anymore before we met. I had a 3-day binge, and I remember going around to my friend's house and just crying and crying and just saying, I can't do it. I'm not going to be able to do it. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. Can't do it. And the next day was my first day of abstinence, which was the 19th of July 2008, and I'm still abstinent from that day. And I feel like it's really a cliche to say it's a miracle, but I couldn't go an hour. I just could not stop eating. And then I did, and then I did again, and then I did again. And I had and then I met my sponsor, and we started going through step 1. And I definitely, the first time I went through the steps, I did it to the best of my abilities. I think I didn't really get the people, places and things. I kind of knew I knew that I was powerless over food. Couldn't remember what it was there. What am I powerless over? Couldn't remember that. I knew that I was powerless over food, but I couldn't quite get the grip of that I was powerless over everything else as well. But it didn't really matter, because that's all it says in the steps. That was powerless over food. My life's become unmanageable, and that was definitely true for me. You know, I couldn't, in the background of all of this, I couldn't hold down a job. I was in school, and there was loads of could do betters. I'd performed incredibly well till I was about 11, and then suddenly I kind of plummeted to the bottom of the class. I left school without any qualifications. You know, everything I would start, I would give up. I would give up every evening class. I would give up everything that I ever started. I would give up. I was like brilliant at beginnings, terrible at middles, terrible. Couldn't understand the middle bit. Just wanted the ending, just absolutely loving the ending. Just let me walk away because I'm done. And so when I actually came in to OA and actually started working steps and actually did it, it was that in itself was a miracle. And I found, for me, a higher power, in fact, my higher power was something that brewed very, very slowly. It felt like a really kind of a faint candle, you know, like a little flickery candle that could go out at any point, because I did definitely, for the first time, understand the concept of hope in step 2, that it didn't have to be me. Just even the being given abstinence made me believe in something, because I knew I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. And it's something that I say I struggled with it for the next 30, I mean, if I've been abstinent 13 and a half years now, I've been struggling with it for about 13 and a half years, because I feel that I'm not a traditional God believer. I don't believe in a God in the sky, but I do believe in the intuition that I have within me. I do believe that I was born with my higher power inside me already, and that it was always there for me to access, but that I didn't want to access it. I think I always looked down on people who believed in God and just thought they were a bit stupid. And so I just, you know, through no fault of my own, just covered it over with everything else, with my pride, with my ego, with loads of food, with loads of fear, and didn't want to access it because I didn't really know it was there anymore. And it was only by coming in, by working the steps, especially step 2, actually, it's just coming to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. That I needed restoring to sanity, and it wasn't just if only I could lose weight. Only I could lose weight, then everything would be fine. It was actually realizing that all my relationships were a little bit broken, like everything was a little bit off. That I would kind of go like a pinball in a machine. I'd kind of careen from situation to situation that was a bit awkward. You know, if you'd asked me how many people I'd want to avoid walking down the street, absolutely loads, because of some weird, awkward thing.
20
Is that
minutes.
20? Oh, thank you. Like some weird, awkward thing that I'd said, that they'd said, that I'd reacted to badly, that they'd reacted to badly. But just everything was just a bit off. And that unmanageability, I hadn't really put together. I hadn't put 2 and 2 together at all. And it was being kind of guided through the steps, especially in my step 4, and realizing I did it in the big book columns way, seeing it all laid out before me, just what my patterns were. And it really gave me the shock of my life, like to see that I actually repeated the same behaviors with a load of different people. And they talk, you know, it talks about a new pair of glasses. I really felt like I saw the world in a new pair of glasses. And subsequently then beat myself up for a good 2 years, probably. I mean, I did 6 and 7. It didn't take me 2 years to do 6 and 7, it didn't take me very long at all. But I kind of carried on that shame, I think, of being like hyper vigilant for all my defects, and really kind of entering into the kind of slough of despond about everything that was wrong with me. And I can still really go into that. And it's almost like every share or every chair, it could end up like being a confessional for all the terrible things that I think, or whatever, all the kind of ugly character traits that I can display, all the ego and the pride and blah, blah, blah. And it took me probably a good 10 years, so I'm not a great advert, a good 10 years to understand about self-compassion, and not just self-compassion, but compassion for others, because I was always quite a kind of head-based, clinical, thought-based person. And you know, that whole thing about the journey from the head to the heart is the longest one. I absolutely found that, because all of my compulsive overeating was about, I just didn't want to be troubled by feelings. I didn't choose it, it's just what got given to me. I just didn't want to feel anything. I just didn't want to feel anything. And the food really helped me. The cigarettes helped me. The TV, endless. You know, I'd be smoking, watching TV, flicking through a magazine, eating. I'd be doing it all at the same time, and it still wasn't enough. Just because whatever it was that I wanted to block out, I wanted to block out. And they also, you know, when you hear people say, oh, I put down the food and the feelings came up. That did not happen to me. I held out, I think, for a good few years. Until I really connected with what was going on inside me. It did not happen overnight, but I really trusted that it would work. I found that I needed the thing that really occurred to me that really kind of hit home was reading the traditions and really understanding for the first time that I had a place within this structure, that I'd always been very much, well, someone else can do it. Someone else will do it. Like always kind of thinking that someone else is going to be there to clear up, not my mess, just the mess, just all the mess. Someone would be there to sort it out. And I really kind of threw myself into service. I went to intergroup fairly early, probably after about a year. I did a lot of meeting service. I was on the National Service Board of Great Britain and went to World Service a couple of times in Albuquerque. And really every single time that I did that, it was like paying back that thing that I couldn't repay, because I was never sponsored. I could do another half hour on sponsorship. I won't. I find sponsorship quite difficult. I've always had sponsees, and I always have had them all the way through, but it's something that doesn't come naturally to me as doing service. So I did more service than sponsorship. And I really, the thing that I did most of was public information. So professional outreach. It was just because I'd been to so many doctors over the years who just hadn't been able to help me apart from that one psychiatrist. I've been to doctors. I remember sitting and crying in front of one of them saying, I just don't know what to do. And he just said, it's not rocket science, just eat less and move more. And I was like, yeah, I totally get it. I totally get why you would think that was the answer. And that is why you cannot help me, because I need another compulsive overeater. I need all of you and all the sponsors I've had. I think I've had the same sponsor now for 9 years, but I've probably had 5 or 6 sponsors. And I feel that every single one of them has given me something different and a different perspective. And so I did a lot of that. I did a lot of talking to doctors, and nurses, just because I was so desperate, probably a little bit too desperate, that everybody find OA. In fact, I definitely went through a period when I came in of wanting to kind of fit everybody I knew into a fellowship. It's like, well, you need to go to AA and you need to go to SLA and you're obviously a gambler. And it was just that the control thing, you know, it's just thinking, not even directly wanting to solve their problems, but wanting them to do this, just so desperately wanting everybody to do this, which I have now mostly let go of. And so, yeah, how it is now is that, as I said, I'm 13 and a half years abstinent, and I've lost whatever it is, 110, 115 pounds. I had a lot of body issues when I lost weight, because I found that I actually hated my body more after I'd let go of that weight than when I was fat. I don't know what the word is that is acceptable, but I was. And I had an operation to remove the loose skin, which was something that I really debated for years. I just thought, if I was God connected, I wouldn't need to do it. If I had any faith, I wouldn't need to do it. Like, I kept trying to talk myself out of it, that if I trusted in God, if I believed in God, then I wouldn't need to have surgery. And also, I was so terrified of having it and then relapsing, just this fear of that I would do it and then I would immediately put all the weight back on, just to teach me a lesson for being such a vain, kind of shallow idiot. And so there was a huge amount of fear attached to it, but I debated for a long time, and I ended up having it done in 2015, so 6 years ago. And I'm such a compulsive overeater. The first question I asked when I came around from surgery was, how much did the skin weigh? How much did it weigh? Like, please, God, tell me. And it was like nothing. It was really like a pound or something. It was so disappointing, because it was, but the doctor said to me, but it was literally just like skin. There's no fat attached to it. It's like, I don't care. That doesn't cheer me up. That's not what I wanted to hear. And it definitely, and what was amazing about having that operation is it actually, for the first time, actually cured something just overnight. It was like, oh, okay, brilliant. That's not here. It didn't cause me loads of problems. It just solved a problem in a really clean way. And I did freak out occasionally. And I did go into fear. But I believe, because I took so long to think about it, and I prayed a lot, and I talked to people who had had it, and I felt it was definitely, despite all my fears, a kind of God-connected decision. So I feel what I love most about that now is I don't have to think about my body. I think I was always so aware of it, kind of the rubbing and the chafing and the how much do I weigh? And like every time I saw somebody, is this somebody, how much, it was almost like the Terminator. I have this little display in front of my eyes telling me how much I weighed last time I saw them. Or should I feel ashamed or should I feel happy? Should I feel, like the number really dictating how I felt, and the freedom that comes from the abstinence and obviously the lack of the food obsession, but just feeling just free physically and all the rest of it. I'm aware that my time is probably nearly up, and there is so much more that I could say. Jean's unmuted.
You have a minute left.
I have a minute left. There is so much I could say. I'm in 2 other fellowships now, or I've been through 2 other. I'm currently in probably one other fellowship, but I have worked the steps in a 3rd fellowship, because I realised how much needed working on after I came in and worked the steps in OA. OA alone wasn't quite enough for me. I wish it had been. It's my absolutely favourite home fellowship. If I had to keep one, it would be this, because I know that all the other stuff is gravy, as they say. Like, I wouldn't give a shit about the other stuff if I was still in the food, because I'd just still be eating. I wouldn't care about anything else. I would say that all my relationships are better. I think I have a lot of fear that, part of the ego thing about doing a chair is this fear that is this imposter syndrome, that people are just gonna think, she's really sick, she sounds really sick. And I think there's part of me that is a real massive overthinker, and I will always kind of, that thing I was saying about the step 6 and 7, I will always kind of go in on myself and turn on myself about all the things that aren't right, and I don't do enough, and I don't, I'm not doing the same service as I used to, and I haven't done anything beyond group for about 2 years now. I'm not doing this, I don't do a written step 10 that often, I'm shit at meditating, like really bad. But I kind of find myself walking down the street and talking to God just out of nowhere. I feel like a troubling thought, and I would just say the word, I'll just suddenly hear myself saying the word God out loud. And my friend used to say to me, if you want to pray and you're with other people, or you're like on the street, you just take your phone out and speak into your phone so people don't know. I don't care anymore. I'll just walk down the street and just start talking to myself.
That's
quiet.
Jacqueline. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. I mean, I'll wrap up, but yeah, I start talking to myself very quietly, but I'll just do it now. I don't care really what anybody else thinks. Amazingly, I could go on, but I won't. Just really incredibly grateful and very pleased to be here, and lovely to see everybody.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And I asked my higher power to help me pick out a random part of the big book that would be fitting. And this is what my higher power chose. And it's from There Is a Solution. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves.